everybody. Welcome back. Hopefully you got something out of part one, and we talked about what you were taught about anger, how you were conditioned, programmed and brainwashed into believing certain things about anger. And hopefully you came out of that understanding maybe what you got taught about anger and how that represented in your life to some degree, and what you do actually now with anger in terms of how you judge it, deem it, look at other people doing it. And so hopefully that helped you understand how you got conditioned. So this time I want to talk about what happens when you do repress anger, because you're not just repressing anger. And I've just made a few notes. In fact, I did a talk on this a while ago, so these are the notes I did from that talk. You can't just repress one emotion without repressing them all, because how you do everything is how you do anything, and how you do anything is how you do everything. I love that saying, because you can't just repress one emotion, because emotions are just that, emotions. We call them good and bad, right and wrong, negative and positive, but actually they're all the same. They just are. So if you repress anger, you also repress lots of other emotions. And this is why people end up depressed, and they can't feel no motivation for life, and they don't get excited, and they don't feel joy and peace and anything. They just feel neutral, they feel blah, they feel numb. And that's because they've repressed one aspect of their emotional being. Well, you can't just do that. You can't just repress anger and think you're going to be able to feel all the other emotions. It just doesn't happen. You repress one, you repress them all. So when you repress anger, you don't just repress anger, you repress joy, happiness, peace, excitement, enthusiasm. You repress your joie de vivre, your that source of life within you. And if you think about it, if we've all been conditioned to do that very early on, well, no wonder we're all depressed. It makes sense, doesn't it? No wonder everyone's miserable and just feels like they're existing on this rat race we call life, because we've been taught repress, deny and avoid certain negative emotions, which we deem wrong and bad, or the parents deem bad and wrong, and then we deem them bad and wrong, and then we do that to our kids. We don't feel like that. Now, we are doing better, and obviously things have changed, thank goodness, and we're a lot more allowing of our kids to have their emotions, and we talked about that in the last one. But I want to tell you what happens when you deny, repress and avoid anger. See, you don't just avoid that, you avoid all those emotions, because how you do everything is how you do anything. So what happens when you repress anger? You repress all that excitement, that enthusiasm for life, that joy. See, I call my rageaholism my biggest superpower, because I actually think it is. Because the depth that I can feel my rage is the depth that I can feel my joy. Now, I want to feel joy. I want to feel excitement. I want to feel enthusiasm. Well, you don't get one without the other. It's like up and down, black and white, good and bad, right and wrong. It's like, there's the good and the bad, there's the dark and the light. And you cannot repress some of the dark without repressing the light. That's why we're all repressed and depressed. What was the last, this was a few years ago, I remember I did a talk about depression, and I think the stats were 25% of most people were depressed. Maybe in Western society you could say that. And I'm sure it's a lot more. In fact, I think it was a lot more, but that was the people they kind of spoke to. So now, I think that was probably 10, 20 years ago now. No, it must have been 15 years ago. So, can you imagine? I know a lot of people that just feel, even if it's a low-grade depression, not full-on depression, because it's that low-grade, life's okay, don't really feel excited, nothing really motivates you, you feel a bit blah, a bit numb. And I think that's why we've all been taught to some degree to repress, deny and avoid. I thank God I couldn't avoid my anger, because I don't think I'd be who I am now, because I feel like I experience joy, peace, love, excitement, enthusiasm to the depth. I get very excited about life, but I feel the deep anger too, the deep sadness. I'm not afraid to go into the deep waters of my negative emotions, because I've learned to embrace them, manage them, hold them, create a safe space for them. So, you don't just repress anger. Now, I've got a couple of quotes here, and the first one is, if you avoid conflict to keep the peace, you start a war inside of yourself. Now, a lot of people do that. They repress their own emotions. Um, and the trouble with that is if you keep doing it, you start this war inside of yourself. And I think that's so true. That's why it built up, it builds up. It just doesn't go away. If it did, well, it doesn't, because energy is, you can't get rid of energy. It just repress and compounds. Okay, the second one is someone who I really respect and deeply love to watch and listen to is Gabor Mate. And he is a doctor, a psychiatrist, and he deals with a lot of addiction. He's all over the internet. Gabor Mate, M-A-T-E. If you want to check him out, please do. He goes far as to say that the repression of anger is the major risk factor for cancer. How many people do we know who have cancer? So maybe that makes sense, you see. You see, I think when you repress emotion, you kind of turn it in on yourself. That anger, you see, if you don't express it, it goes inward. And you harm yourself. Now, I know there were studies done about repression of anger causes heart problems, heart attacks. It's like you're sucking up that and it's pushing down on this part of your body and it represses that organ that is your heart. So we know now that a lot of these emotional states cause physical symptoms within the body. And we know that. And I think that's fascinating. So I think you've got to understand, yes, this is how you're conditioned, but also the impact that that might have on you as a person now and how you do life, how you experience your emotions, how you experience day-to-day life. And so this is the second part, because I think it does warrant a lot of talking about. I think this is important. If you know someone that's depressed or repressed or anxious or sick or whatever, send it to them, because I think people need educating around what happens when you repress and deny your own anger. And a lot of people don't even realise they're doing that, because that's the way where they were conditioned to be on the planet. They adapted into a sort of person that, I don't really do anger. That always staggers me when I work with a client. I go, do you feel angry about that? No. And I realise why, because they've repressed it and they've disconnected from it. It's like they've disconnected this heartbeat from their head, and they've compartmentalised it. That's another word we might use. They've disassociated from it. They don't even know they feel angry. That's how separate that. That's how much they've repressed it and then separated from it. And so you're not just repressing anger. And when you understand what you're doing to yourself, and you're possibly Gabor Mate, well renowned, like huge. You look him up on the internet. The repression of anger is the major risk factor for cancer. How many people do we know that have cancer? How many people do we know that suffer? And I'm convinced that this is all about the repression of anger. And I think people sometimes can feel quite superior if they never feel angry. I feel like some people will judge, oh, look at those people being so angry, as if like they're inferior, and they feel superior because they never experience their own anger. I'm sorry, I just think they're the sickest people here. They're the sickest people on the planet. They are the people that really probably struggle, or will ultimately sometimes struggle with albeit possibly even cancer. So I want to challenge you to realise what you're doing when you repress anger. Challenge you to think about your emotions in a different way. Challenge you to be curious about what you were taught and what you're actually doing to yourself and your body. And maybe to even think about some of the things you put in that little box, that little compartment. You put it in a little box far away and you deem it wrong and bad, and well, those baser emotions. And it's not about becoming aggressive and lashing out and losing control. It's not. That's the ultimate end of it, isn't it? When we repress it, it's about acknowledging how you might have felt about something that someone did to you, that someone is doing to you. And you know what? Anger is a motivating energy. Emotion gives you the motion forward. And this is what I know when I work with a lot of people who have DV relationships. You know, sometimes all I want to do is heal them, connect them, not leave or do anything. That's not my job to tell them what to do. They have to make that decision. But I know when they're connected back and they can see what's happening, they get angry. And that's how they should feel. You should feel, I don't use that word because it's, you know, shouldn't all over yourself, but you should feel angry. If someone is disrespectful, treating you negatively is not treating you with kindness and respect, then you should feel angry. Anger is the normal response to have if someone's abusing you, walking all over you, taking advantage of you, you know, violating you. And that anger is not so you can lash out back at them. It's about you can take action then. You can actually have the energy to take charge of your own life and make decisions. I'm going to leave it there because I think I do want to do this in bite size because I know it's a lot of information. So I'll leave it there and I will talk to you again with part 3. Bye for now.